Hello, everybody coming in. It's so nice to see everybody. If you can keep your cameras on, that's wonderful. We love to see your faces, but we understand if you are unable to. Um, Welcome to Past and Present with Allison Gilbert and guests. My name is Andrew Engel. I'm senior programmer at Reimagine. Our mission is to help people of all backgrounds face adversity, loss, and mortality, and channel the hard parts of life into meaningful action and growth. For Grief is the sponsor of Past and Present. For Grief offers a better way for people to navigate loss by offering unprecedented and direct access to the country's most preeminent grief experts and authors, and they are here with us today. You can learn more about For Grief by going to their website, forgrief.com. I want to offer you a few Zoom tips. You can view a live transcript by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of the screen, and you can save the chat, and please use that chat. By clicking on the three dots in the chat box, feel free to send a note in the chat privately if you're having any technical issues. I might be able to help you. Today is the final session of this season's Past and Present series. Allison Gilbert and her guests have been focusing on self-care before and after loss, and you can tune into these previous recordings by going to Reimagine or For Grief's YouTube channels. And we look forward to seeing you next year when we resume Past and Present. And I'm very excited that this partnership with For Grief and with Allison is continuing with Reimagine. And now I'm just going to hand this off to my colleague, Allison Gilbert.
Thank you so much, Andy. I am so glad, as I am every time we meet, to be with everybody. It's an honor, truly, and it's a chance for us to begin perhaps in a different place than we have been in the past, and I will explain. We only have an hour together, and in this hour, I would love to invite you to truly be present. There is a reason why you signed up for this conversation today about remembering loved ones and getting ready for the holiday season. So if you can, give yourself the opportunity to turn off your notifications on your laptops, put your phone maybe on the other side, and just avail yourself to just these few minutes. I know for me, it has been a very crazy last couple of days. Normally, I join you from New York, and today I'm in Reykjavik, Iceland, joining you where about 45 minutes from where I am, there has been an entire town being evacuated because of a fear of a volcanic eruption happening. I'm here for Children's Grief Awareness Day. The very first center of its kind has launched in the entire country to support grieving children. So I was here speaking with the president of Iceland today about this wonderful achievement in this country. But it's been unnerving to be in a country where 4,000 people have been told to leave their homes, including those children. So it's unstable. And we talked today about how nature can be destabilizing. And of course, as we know, and the experts who are joining you today, Hope Edelman, Charlene Lamb, and Dr. Jason Schroyer, they know that death can be destabilizing too. And where our power comes from is agency and doing something in the face of what does feel out of our control, and that is remembering our loved ones. So with that as a primer, please continue to tell us where you are joining us from. I would love to know where you're dialing in from, but I'm going to start today with Dr. Jason Troyer, and I will stop calling you doctor, but I wanted people to know your street cred, Jason. I want to start with you, Jason, because you have a book that's not yet out. So it feels kind of sexy to talk about something that nobody else knows about yet. And it's called, I'm not going to get this wrong, Jason, it's called Rituals Reimagined. And it's an exploration of why rituals and customs are so important to healing. And when I think about the holidays, of course, we think about traditions. So let me start with you about this book that is coming. Tell us about these rituals reimagined and how we can use them for the holidays. Oh, you're on mute, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. And thank you so much for the question and spotlighting the forthcoming book. There's still a bit of work to be done on it. But over the last couple of years, while grief and loss and will always have a special place in my mind, in my heart, in my work, lately I've been really thinking so much about these private moments of transformation. And that's maybe my definition of ritual, these moments that we have that are so unseen typically. Now, certainly we typically might have more public events, especially after the loss of our loved one, a funeral, memorial service, a celebration of life, those sorts of things. But increasingly, I'm thinking about all of the numerous private moments that come up where it sparks a memory, those sorts of things, and how often we don't talk about them, how often they catch us off guard. Certainly, there are moments when you're standing in front of the dairy case at the grocery store and you see the eggnog and you hate eggnog, but maybe your partner, your child, your parent loved eggnog, and it just kind of sparks that grief burst for a moment, those sorts of things. And so an example of a little ritual is maybe even though you hate the stuff, maybe you decide this holiday season you're gonna drink a couple of sips of eggnog just in kind of memory of them. You don't even tell anybody about it. You don't post on social media. But how often can we make these work for us as a way to help us heal, help us remember our loved ones, and kind of rebuild our own lives? So there's countless little things that we can be doing to really look for ways to honor their memory, to have a moment of purpose and meaning that maybe just be important to us, and really take advantage of those opportunities to kind of really spark those memories, spark that meaning.
Before I bring in Charlene and Hope, I just want to stay with you for a little bit more, Jason. You have a unique perspective because you're deep, deep, deep in the funeral profession. And so you write a lot of resources for funeral homes to distribute to the bereaved. So you're really, For Grief really likes to be at that epicenter of loss. You, Jason, Charlene, Hope, you're all a part of the For Grief Speakers Bureau. And so you're really on this topic. And there's one thing that you have talked about that I want to kind of push you on a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You talk about the why of ritual. And this is, to me, really important. You talk about the why. And you highlight, I'm not going to ask you to name them all, 11 intentions when it comes to ritual. Can you share with us maybe 2 of your 3 favorite intentions? Like, what is the intentionality behind rituals and the holidays?
Yeah. Several of the intentions have to do with, I think of intentions as these various processes of transformation, and these various, we might call them threshold moments, we might call them liminal moments, those sorts of things, where we are kind of these signposts in our journey, wherever it might be. And sometimes that is recognizing a new beginning, which of course often comes with grief. Sometimes that is a symbolic of saying goodbye, even though we might be saying goodbye to the physical presence of our loved one in our life, even though we know that they will never be a part of us kind of spiritually and emotionally, those sorts of things. So recognizing losses, new beginnings, And I think another one that is huge for grief happens to be these intentions of kind of the crossing over to a new step and the first time we do something. So that might be the first time, if you lost your spouse and you didn't take care of the finances, the first time that you went into the bank and did something. These moments of personal transformation where I went from someone who didn't feel confident doing that to doing it here. And the holidays are filled with that. Certainly our grief journeys are just absolutely filled with all of those moments. So recognizing that those are big deals, recognizing that they can be very challenging. We might need to call in our friends and support systems to do those sorts of things, and then celebrate them once we've done that. They often are major milestones and things worth being celebrated. So that might be venturing out and doing something on your own that you used to do with your loved one, but maybe we've got to come up with a new way to do that. Maybe we've got to ask our niece or nephew or an adult child to go with us, or those sorts of things. How can we adjust some of those holiday traditions so that we're still getting the full benefit of them, even if they're a little bit scary, a little bit, we know that it's going to be an emotional moment. How can we steel ourselves and be ready to kind of still get the benefits of those moments?
I want to extract, to me, one of the most essential takeaways of what you've just said, just so I can highlight it, underscore it, and add 1,000 exclamation points. What you're talking about is owning a change and acting on it, having agency. So it's the doing something that I think is where the healing is. And author Hope Edelman is expert at that. She is expert at the doing. She has, of course, we all know her from her best-selling books, Motherless Daughters, Motherless Mothers, The After Grief. Not only am I a friend of Hope's, but I'm a fan of Hope's. But she and I just came back from I see someone's holding up, Jill's holding up The After Grief. That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Hope leads these really meaningful in-person retreats for motherless daughters in California and in Connecticut. She invited me to be her helper on the Connecticut retreat. And why I'm mentioning this now in my transition to talking about hope is that it takes such courage and intentionality to go to a retreat, to lay it bare. And there was focus on the holidays coming up that maybe weren't during the workshop time, but during the time where people got to meet and talk and be in community together. So Hope, I would like to toss it to you. This is a part of self-care, right? Taking care of yourself, but in relationship to keeping memories alive. Tell us about what you think the magic sauce is, the secret sauce of what you're doing with these motherless daughters retreats.
Well, I think it's like you said, Allison, and I want to thank everyone for being here today, and thank Andy and Reimagine and Christina and Allison, of course, and my co-panelists, Jason and Charlene. It's an honor to be here with all of you. And like Allison said, we're just coming off of a retreat, and we talked a lot about intentionality, and we get to choose where we place our intention. And I love that this conversation started off by talking about ritual, because at Motherless Daughters, we are big fans of ritual, because ritual is a way to connect the past, the present, and the future when you do something over and over again across time. And that creates a sense of continuity. And continuity is grounding. And continuity is something that many of us lost when a loved one died. Unlike Jason, who's so involved in the funeral industry, which helps people, many people, in the aftermath of a profound loss and a life-altering event, I work in the field of what's called historical grief, which are adults who were bereaved when they were young, when they were children, teenagers, young adults. And I do work with adult women who've lost mothers as well, but it's a very, it's a vertical, women who've lost mothers. And, a lot of women say that their moms were the tradition keeper in the family, or the one who perpetuated the rituals. And that after she passes, how do they keep those rituals alive in the absence maybe of the structure or the place where those rituals occurred over the years? And I think I've been thinking, we often think about continuing traditions to honor our loved ones and to do it in the way that they did it, which gives us a sense of meaning and that sense of continuity. But sometimes that's just not possible. We don't have the family home anymore, or we don't have the items, that were there, that were used year after year. So I just want to encourage all of you and invite you to also be aware that we can create rituals as well, and they can become meaningful over time, that it only takes 2 times to start building a new ritual. The first time we do it, it's an event. And the second time we can be building a ritual, right? There's no such thing as a first annual, but I learned that in journalism school. I'm sure you did too, Allison.
Yes,
There's second annual, third annual, fourth annual, and we can build new traditions that can be equally as meaningful, either by co-opting some of the past traditions or creating new ones. So I think intentionality and creativity is also really important. To be creative in our thinking, think out of the box. What's meaningful to us and those around us, and what also honors those who have passed, who we want to carry forward into the present.
Let me just pause and just say that there could be some of you who are thinking, well, good, what does this have to do with the umbrella topic of this series, which is self-care? And my position would be, this has everything to do with self-care. Because when our relationships with those who have died feel fractured, and we have the power to make them stronger by doing what Hope is suggesting, by doing what Jason is talking about with ritual, that is us taking care of ourselves by strengthening these tethers to those we still love. And before I go, and Charlene, I'll bring you in, I promise, I do want to ask Hope maybe a few specific ideas. You lost your mom, Hope, when you were 17 years old. You have now spent so much, your entire adult life, remembering and building connections with your mom, Marcia. And are there some special ways that you enjoy keeping her memory alive for yourself, for your 2 daughters? How does that play out in the home of Hope Edelman?
Well, I have some of my mother's items, not many, because there are 3 children and we've divided up all of the family possessions, but I do have several items of hers that are on display. One is a crystal vase that was a wedding gift, and I fill it with my favorite flowers in her favorite vase, and I have it out all the time. I've told some of my friends, if I had to choose between food or flowers, I would choose the flowers, because it's a way to honor my mother every day in my dining room. I mean, food on the table or flowers in the vase. I keep a picture of her out. It's such a small thing that we can do, but so many women come to my retreats and want to know how they can bring their mom back into their lives, how they can reconnect with her because their relationships may have been fractured. And to take a picture of her and put it on some place where you have a lot of foot traffic, and just several times during the day to go by and touch your finger very lightly on the top of the frame is a really sweet, simple way to stay connected and just say, hi, I'm remembering you. I miss you. I love you. You matter. It's small, but effective. When you do it, you really feel it. So those are 2 very simple, small things that I do. And then of course, at holiday time, I try to cook some of the foods that she used to make, or I think, mostly I try to bring people together and engage in acts of service, because she was very much about both of those things. When I think about how to honor my mother, I think about what qualities did she embody that I would like to carry forth in the world, and how can I do that, even if it's in some small way, on this holiday season.
I love that. And Charlene, I am happy to bring you into the discussion now. Thank you for your patience. Charlene normally lives in Lisbon, Portugal. Today, she is joining us from Los Angeles, California, where she is attending the Endwell conference. If you don't know, is it a conference? Would you call it a conference? Maybe that's the wrong
symposium.
way. Symposium. I'm sorry. So check out Endwell. I'm so glad that you are there. If I wasn't in Reykjavik, I would have been in Los Angeles. Please do tell us how it is. But I do want to bring you in. So you have a curation background, an artist curation background. It's such a wonderfully different perspective for this conversation. I want to read something so I don't get it wrong when we're talking about your work, Charlene. You have spoken about the 3 most important questions to ask yourself during the holidays. So let me, I'm going to remind you what you have said, and then I would like you to expand upon them if you don't mind. Number 1, how do you remember the person you've lost? Maybe especially as it relates to the holidays. So the first question is how. The next one is a version of that, which is, how do you want to remember that person? Maybe there is a discrepancy between those two. And the third, how do you want that person to be remembered? So that's much more qualitative, right? It's the character, it's the traits maybe that you're going to. Help us explain, and then we can talk more about your work. But I love adding this really intentional layer. And that's why I'm so glad that you're here with us today, Charlene. And I'm glad that your trip from Lisbon to LA was so easy that you were able to join us and not miss our conversation.
It was a long one, but it was worth it. And I'm so glad to be able to join you wherever you're joining from in the world, whether you're joining live or watching the replay. And Allison, thank you so much for naming those 3 questions, because I want to back up and say, okay, curating. Let me define that. What do I even mean by curating? Why curate grief? And in the last couple of decades, people use curating in a lot of different ways. You can curate a restaurant menu, you can curate a Spotify playlist. But when I use it, I do mean the more traditional sense of a curator in a museum or in a gallery. Museums, gallery spaces have always been my safe place. My mother loved museums, and I have a lot of pictures of little me in front of sculptures, trying to strike the same pose as the sculptures, all prompted by my mother. So when my mother died 10 years ago, I really leaned into that love for art and creativity, and also my work. I was working as an independent curator in London at the time, and I was doing pop-up exhibitions featuring the work of artists and designers. So when I love how we've talked about intentionality, all 3 of us, right? We've brought this up. Because to me, curating is choosing with intention. Because what happens when we curate? The 3 questions that Allison has named, you actually quickly go through a series of questions, making choices when you ask yourself, if I was to curate an exhibition about my loved one, what would I choose to display? You see behind me, sculpture with a display pedestal. I brought props. We call that a plinth. It's one of my favorite words. And someone, often a curator, has chosen what goes on that plinth. What's important? What do I want to spotlight? I could have chosen all these things, but I want to choose this, and I'm going to tell you what I want you to know about this important object. And with the Grief Gallery, that's what I'm offering. That's what I'm offering you to consider that question for yourself.
I love that idea. And Christina, if you can throw in the chat a link to the Grief Gallery, I would really appreciate it, because someone was just saying in the chat that they couldn't see what Charlene was pointing to. So maybe having that link available now would be useful. I like this idea, because let's just go down to someone's home level. Sometimes we may have kept objects that belong to our loved ones, but maybe kept them in a drawer or a box. We're overwhelmed, but there's something, perhaps, I'm not sure how this lands for everybody, that could be liberating by focusing on a single object and then elevating it. And how would you do that, Charlene, do you think, in the context of Thanksgiving around the corner? Is there anything that we could do more quickly as it relates to the holidays? Because what you're describing could be this incredible longer term project, but I'm wondering if there's a way to shift and do something in the next few days and weeks. And then, of course, I want to remind people, as Charlene is getting ready for her answer, in about 5 minutes or so, I'm going to open the floor up for your questions. So if you have a question for Jason, Hope, or Charlene, or me, of course, put them in the chat. And then Christina Sirio, if you can wave, she will go through the chat and she will select questions that are applicable to the most people so we can help the most people. We will end on time. So no matter where you are, if that's in New York and that's 2 o'clock, if you're in LA and that's 11, don't wait, because we're not going to stay over. I know this is in the middle of a work day for many people, or maybe children are at school, or maybe you have a yoga class to go to. Whatever it is, I want to honor your time. So if you do have a question, make sure you put in the chat so you don't kick yourself later and wish you had asked it during this time. So Charlene, back to you about the holidays and maybe taking some of this wisdom and using it perhaps on a more quick basis. What do you think?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be a huge, strenuous project. I love how you named Elevate. It really is about elevating the everyday. How Hope mentioned the vase, the items that are in her home. Because with curating, yes, my background was curating, but I would say that I'm offering the lens of curating, and that you are likely already curating and choosing, because I see in your backgrounds shelves and there's artwork on your walls. You have chosen with intention what takes up space. So as you're heading into the holidays, one, I'm a big fan of pop-up exhibitions. Even museums and galleries switch up what they show. You can do the same. At home, I wish I had a gallery space, working on it, but I do have a shelf that's dedicated to my mother. And I switch that up. I will switch it up for the holidays. I'm going to bring in some of her favorite food. I'm going to get out some of the ornaments that I still have. So, events.
I love that idea. It reminds me of what the author Gretchen Rubin has talked about, creating an altar. She loves using, I hope I'm not remembering this incorrectly, but she loves using trays as a way of organizing collections. And I've always loved that idea. Before we go to questions, I want to do a couple of housekeeping things, because I would like to know this if I was sitting in the audience too. Sometimes I learn so much on these calls. I want to stay in touch and keep learning from all of the guests. So let me just do a pause and make sure everyone knows how to stay in touch with Hope and Jason and Charlene, if for some reason you have to drop off the call early, or just as a reminder. So For Grief, we would not be here without For Grief. They're on Facebook at For Grief. There's a community page. So if you want to keep talking, join the Facebook community page for Grief, and that way we can keep the conversation going. Hope Edelman, you are everywhere. Hope_Edelman on Twitter or X, Hope_Edelman on Instagram, and Hope Edelman author on Facebook. And of course, I personally know if you go to your website, you can find out so much about the Motherless Daughters retreats, and I highly recommend that you guys do so. Dr. Jason Scheuer, we'll call you Jason here, but on Twitter, you're Dr. Jason Scheuer. Instagram, Dr. Jason Scheuer. And on Facebook, it's Jason.Scheuer. Don't forget the dot. And Charlene, it's curating_grief on Twitter. It's curating_grief on Instagram. And it's Charlene C. Lamb. Don't forget the middle initial C. I've done that mistake. And that's on Facebook. So just a little housekeeping. I just want to make sure that I did that. And by the way, Christina, I'm going to throw it to you next, but I wanted to remind people, we're talking a lot about objects and heirlooms and rituals around possessions. And I produced a course about objects and heirlooms. It's one of my passion subjects. And now For Grief on the For Grief website has it as an asynchronous course. So you can go on the For Grief platform. There's lots of courses there that are on demand. And you can find my course on objects and heirlooms and sentimental ways of connecting through physical items. Okay, Christina Sirio, please bring in everyone and tell us what's on their mind.
Okay, we have a lot of anonymous questions. So the first one, how do I honor my oldest son who died and not overshadow my 2 living kids during the holidays? Which I think would apply to other surviving family members.
Yeah. Hope, do you want to take that on, do you think?
Sure. I would say to this participant, it is very likely that your other children are looking for ways to honor their brother as well. And so we might look at, or I would encourage you to look at family rituals where everyone can participate and honor that person together, assuming that they all want to or had a relationship or want to have an ongoing relationship in that way. That perhaps there is a way to create a family ritual that will honor the member who is no longer with us in the physical world. And then, of course, there are ways that you might want to do that on your own. But I would say communication is key, and to check in and, to ask those other children, are you feeling like perhaps I am not present enough for you this holiday season? I want you to know that I'm missing your brother, and I know that you are too, and looking for ways to honor him, and I'm sure you are as well, and keep the lines of communication open.
Jason, you may know more than most. I mean, you're in the thick of it with the funeral profession, where families are really perhaps at sometimes their rawest. And I'm just wondering, how do family dynamics play out when you're talking about the book that you're writing and the work that you've already produced for funeral homes in terms of loss and how people can navigate the next weeks and months?
Yeah, I think one the very wise Therese Rando, who is a wonderful grief writer and researcher, she listed out many benefits of rituals. And one thing that she mentioned that I think we forget about sometimes is that every ritual has a beginning and an end, and they can kind of encapsulate our time and our energy in that moment. So it might be just talking about some examples with that situation, if you feel like it would be meaningful to go to your child's place of final rest and invite but not force your other children to go along with you, you can go there. You might do something while you're there. You might play a song, you might talk to them, you might write a note, you might leave something behind, and then you leave. And then it's like, okay, now it's time to take my living children to their favorite restaurant, or we're going to do something I know that you would enjoy. And so often I think, because our memories and our grief is so painful, sometimes we almost kind of tap dance near the pain. And what I like about rituals is we kind of step in and we feel it, and we feel all the feels, and we do what we need to do, and we can kind of step out of it, and it's okay to step out and be distracted by other things, and that's okay. And we don't have to feel guilty for that at all. But it's almost better to, I like, maybe it's because I'm a morning person, I like a morning ritual, because it's like, not that you've done your grief for the day, but it's like I've engaged with it, I've honored my loved one, and now it's okay if the rest of the day I do feel more comfortable laughing a little bit, being distracted, doing some fun things. But that power of encapsulation, where we can kind of move into it and move out of it, I think is really important.
Some people say that about exercise, getting it over with in the morning.
Yeah.
I haven't been one of those people, but I hear that some people say that. Charlene, please add your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd also like to say that for the holidays, it's also what you're ready for. And people have mentioned, oh, I don't know if I feel ready to curate, or I don't know if I feel ready to let go, or I don't know if I feel ready. And that is totally okay. With the people that Jason works with, who are closer to the loss, you really might be in that, just getting through it. just trying to survive, right? Those first couple of holidays are really tough, and you might not feel like celebrating. You might just be coping. And that is what you need. And what I offer is, when you're ready and you want to celebrate as well as cope, that curating can be a fun lens for that. And the 3 questions that Allison brought up, I do have a holidays resource for you. So if you go to charlenelamb.com/holidays, that takes you to a video that kind of fleshes out those 3 questions for you. If you're in that place of, okay, I've been coping and I want to bring back some traditions. I want to be able to be there for my kids who are excited about the holidays. So if you want to celebrate and cope when you feel ready, I invite you to do that.
I love that. And Christina already put, before you even were done saying it, it's already in the chat. Christina, let's have some more questions. I love hearing from everybody.
So this person says, in addition to the precious, meaningful items that we want to keep and curate, we often inherit a lot of stuff that was important to our person who died, but honestly, we don't want to keep. We also have documents like driver's licenses and work IDs. How do we honorably and respectfully get rid of that stuff?
I feel like this question is perfect for Charlene. Can we start there?
Absolutely. Yes, let's talk about the stuff.
Yeah.
So one lens that I like to offer is to consider, what's the role that the object plays in your life? Maybe that was a really precious and important object for the person who owned it. What is that role for you now? Right? I'm wearing my ring that my mother gave me. This serves like a connection to her and almost like a talisman. I'm keeping this. There were lots of things in her house that she liked that don't fit into my life. They don't fit into my home. She had a 3-bedroom house. I had a 1-bedroom apartment in London. So precious to her, meaningful to her, great for her life, not for mine. And I would also consider what's the role that you want to play with the stuff and with the objects? Are you the custodian? Are you the caretaker? Are you the curator? Over time, I have chosen and chosen again with my mother's belongings. And I often think, I am the keeper of my mother's stories. I'm the keeper of the narrative of my mother's life. I don't necessarily have to be the keeper of all of her stuff in order to be that.
I love that. Hope Edelman, please. I think that you will definitely have perspective, especially because you're also, this may not be directly in the workbook that you are writing. I know that we are all waiting. I am, for this workbook that's in your brain. It has to come through your fingers onto the laptop. You and Jason have got to get it done. Fever happening in each of your offices. Does this play a part of the workbook that you are working on in terms of helping us move forward, parse possessions, decide priority steps in your grief journey? How does this play out for you?
That's a great question. No, I was not planning on putting that in the Motherless Daughters workbook, but maybe there will be space for it. I think, Allison, you're going to be a great resource for this question too, because you are the queen of repurposing. You have given me so many ideas for how to repurpose items or materials, like everything from taking all of your dad's ties and making it into a quilt, for example. But I love digitizing. I'm so grateful that we have this option now, because I feel like, yes, it is expensive to have a storage space filled with someone's possessions that were meaningful to them, but not to us. What I've found personally meaningful is to take photos of all the items and then create some work of art out of those photos, whether it's a collage or a book that you can order online, right? One book with 100 photos in it takes up a lot less space than 100 items. Plus, you can make 10 copies of that book and share it with all the loved ones who might want to have those items in their possession somehow. And then meaningfully think about how to distribute items to people who will appreciate them or use them or care for them in ways that perhaps we cannot. So I'm a big fan of digitizing, turning anything that we can into things that can live in the cloud or be shared with others in a different form.
I love that. I love that. Jason, before I shamelessly promote what Hope's talking about, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I think excellent answers already, and I don't want to get in the way of. You're great at this. The one thing I would add is, for people who know me well, they know that at the heart of things, I'm a thinker. I'm a thinker. But even I would say, when you're looking at items and doing this curation process, trust your gut, and trust your gut no matter what the item is, because and don't pay attention to supposed to. You may not feel connected to your grandmother's china because, quite frankly, it was never used. Like, it never saw the light of day. And so it just does. Maybe it's supposed to mean something to me, but it just doesn't. We never used it. But maybe her hairbrush, or maybe your, a family member's, like, the tools of their trade, the hammer, the chisel, the, a mixing bowl from the kitchen that was kind of the everyday sorts of things. Whatever strikes your heart and your gut is worth it, even if it's not something that you would think of as an heirloom or things like that. And some of the supposed heirlooms you might give away quite freely and not think twice about it, other than this nagging idea, maybe I should value it because they wanted me to have it, or whatever it might be. I trust your gut on those things, but yeah.
So I want to go with this thread of, like, it's an object. It meant something to someone at one point, but it doesn't mean something to me, but I'm feeling guilt about it. If you go on my Instagram, I think at this point, closing in on a year ago, you will see the genius idea that I did with the sweaters that my grandmother knit for everyone in the family before she died. I'm going to tell you this brief story because it's super relevant. These were ugly. Okay. I love my grandma. She died. They took on greater meaning, of course, because she passed away, but they were still ugly sweaters. Okay. They were shapeless. They made you look even heavier. Bad, bad, bad. And they were actually made with really inexpensive wool, which made it even less appealing to wear. So for years, we all, in our separate closets, kept these sweaters, never being worn, because, of course, out of guilt, you keep them. All right. So enter genius idea. I was writing my book, Past and Present, Keeping Memories of Loved Ones Alive. That book has 85 different ideas for remembering, honoring, celebrating loved ones. And these are all creative ideas, as Hope was, very generously mentioning, for, rethinking what objects could be. So what did I do? I gathered all of these ugly sweaters and I brought them to a knit shop where there are people who are talented. I do not know how to knit. I am not talented. I instructed them, I asked them to unfurl every sweater and then remake them into gloves and mittens and hats that we could actually wear. And then last holiday season, if you go on my Instagram, that is what I gave everybody. So everyone now has these hats and gloves and mittens that were made from my grandmother's sweaters. And I don't normally do this. And Marty, I'm not going to call on you to speak, because the last thing I want to do is turn my events into a pitch session of other people's work. But I will just mention that Marty McNabb is on this call, and she is featured in Past and Present because what her work is very much to the point of our conversation today. She does something you can look up in Past and Present, Marty McNabb's work. She takes the idea of show and tell and pulls it completely on its head, where she invites people in person and virtually to do meaningful show and tells, which you could do for the holiday. In my family, we have a tradition where we go around the table and say what we're thankful for. There is no reason why you couldn't instruct or invite everyone in your family to bring an object with them that reminds you of your loved one, and then go around the table and describe this letter, this measuring spoon, whatever it is, and how it connects you to that loved one. And so, Marty, you're in past and present. I see your face here. I wanted to acknowledge that you are the queen bee of this conversation. And I'm just so grateful to see you show up. Christina, I want to go back to you and get more questions in.
How do you balance the memories with the need to move through and forward in your life? This question came specifically from a widower who eventually wants to have another relationship and doesn't want his future partner to feel overwhelmed by his partner's items.
Hope Edelman, this is for you.
Why is this one for me? Because I'm dating a widower. I am. And that is something that is very present in our lives right now. I think ideally you hope that you will find a partner in the future who can make room for that person and understand how important that person was to you. They may have a similar person in their lives, and to understand the place that those and the value that those items have to you emotionally. And when you find that right person, you will find ways to make space together. It's not something that you need to decide in advance or decide now. You know, something we didn't speak about, and Charlene, perhaps you can talk about this as well, is what we call transitional objects. Objects that people hold on to because it helps them feel close to that person. And it's part of, I don't like the phrase letting go so much, because I feel like we're not letting go of the people we love. We're not letting go of their possessions as much as we're finding a new and different way to carry them forward. To the person who wrote that, who asked that question, you may find in time, you didn't mention how long it's been since your wife passed, but you may find new and different ways to carry her items forward, and ways that, I'm sorry, how long was it?
A little over 2 years.
Oh, that's not very much. So right now, I imagine there's comfort in being surrounded by her possessions, which perhaps you curated together. They're yours as well.
Curation is a good way to put it, because she was an artist. So I was relating to what Charlene was talking about when she used the language of curation. So thanks for responding to my question. I appreciate it.
And they're your items as well, not just they're things that you have collected together, I imagine. So I would hope that anyone who enters your life will understand and appreciate that they are not just her possessions or her artwork, but also things that are important and meaningful and chosen by you. But about transitional objects, I mean, my transitional object after my mom died was her fur coat. And I was completely opposed to fur coats personally. I was, 18, 19 years old. I had friends who were, throwing paint at people on street corners. I didn't do that, but I, understood and respected their choices. But it helped me feel close to my mom. I could still smell her perfume on it. And I kept it for about a year. I just needed it close to me. And then I was ready to let it go. And so those transitional objects, we shouldn't let anyone pressure us to let go of them or get rid of them. And, to this person who is speaking, you will find a comfortable way it will be an integration process is what I mean. It will not be necessarily a replacement process. It will be an integration process. And I hope that the person you do find to welcome into your environment can understand that and do that with you. And so that you can co-curate perhaps a space together in the future. Charlene, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I love that you named co-curate, and really we're co-creating. When I do an exhibition, I'm actually doing an installation of the Grief Gallery here at Endwell. And every time I do this, I feel like I'm co-creating it with my mother. And transitional objects, the way I think of them is almost like a blankie or the stuffed animal that we would have as children, but something that keeps us feeling comforted and safe when we are in a transition period. And we are often in a transition period when we are dealing with significant loss. So I do want to acknowledge too that you might not have anything. Some of us, our problem is we have too much stuff. We have too many physical objects. And other people, as I've learned being in Hope's Motherless Daughters group, sometimes people lost their person when they were young and they didn't get the chance to keep anything. They didn't get to make decisions. and you can still curate. Yes, these objects, these belongings can be so meaningful, and it's not actually about the object.
No, it's not. It's about the memory attached to the object, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I don't have a lot of my mother's possessions, but she loved peppermint patties. So I drop peppermint patties into the gift bags at motherless daughters retreats sometimes, or I'll put a bowl out in my living room at a party. And that is, to me, a form of honoring her and curating. It's so small, but it's meaningful to me.
Hershey's Kisses for my mom. Yes.
Hershey's Kisses.
Yes. And I love that you named attachment, right? Because actually you can detach what you're trying to keep from the object. If you can't keep it, you can still have what you're trying to keep. So if you're faced with this challenge, I would maybe ask yourself, what are you really trying to hold on to? The objects can definitely make it easier. It can be a really nice visual prompt to think about our loved one in a certain way, but really it's what's attached to it that we're trying to hold on to. So if for the holidays you're thinking, we don't have that family home anymore, we don't have the exact plates, I don't even have the exact recipe, is that what you're really trying to hold on to? Or are there other ways to bring that in and reinterpretation of what you're really trying to hold on to, what you're really trying to keep that continuing bond with?
I want to bring in Jason in a way that maybe you're not expecting before we go on to the last few questions, Jason. So tell us about the grief plan that you have created. And specifically, by the way, it's an online grief program and it's, wonderful. But section 4, I want to lean on or lean into a little bit. It's all about remembering section 4. Yeah. And there's one piece in that section that I saw called remembering with sacred objects. And so let's give a quickie. When you're thinking about the holidays and Thanksgiving, what can we turn immediately into a sacred object? To go back to that word that Charlene and I are embracing, elevating. Let's lean into your grief plan, section 4, remembering the sacred objects, Thanksgiving, go.
Yeah, and I think it is about kind of going back to those things we were talking about earlier. Sometimes our most precious items are those things that we are those everyday objects. And so the things that we would use to, being in the kitchen and cooking with our loved ones is often such a personal time and so many memories there. And so literally it might be maybe your most treasured object is using the same cutting board or using this kind of ancient knife set that you're just not going to get rid of, or the same pots and pans, or the teacup, those sorts of things. But anything could be elevated to kind of that sacred object status. And so, the Grief Plan program is a series of videos that could be helpful. So people can kind of go through that at their own pace. I do have, my first book was actually, I don't mention it very often because I wrote it for mental health therapists, but it's actually titled Counseling Widowers. And so I have had some widowers who've decided to read that, even though it's more geared towards the therapists and a lot of references and citations to theories and practices and things like that. However, I know we sometimes use theories and models to try to make sense of some of the things that our question asker was asking about. And one model that has, I might be really late to the game, which is, we have, folks like Bill Warden's theories, tasks of grief and things like that. But Lois Tonkin's growing around grief model that I've only come across the last couple of years, but this idea that your grief will kind of stay the same size through your life, but that we hope to kind of grow. And it's almost kind of like the proportion changes, even though I love that it honors the power of our loss and it never tries to minimize it, but it also focuses on there can be these growth opportunities as well. So that might be that just came to mind as that gentleman asked that question about how do we kind of not give short shrift to our loss, but also keep ourselves open to those new relationships and experiences. I like that Tonkin model a lot. And there's a great visual. You can Google it and I'm sure you'll come up with a better description of it.
I'm going to stop you there. We have 4 minutes left. I want to remind people we're in our lightning round session. Jason, people are going to reach out to you. I'm going to remind them, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, go find Dr. Jason Troyer. please do. Hope Edelman, we have 4 minutes. I want you to take one of them and very quickly say about what's happening with Motherless Daughters Retreats in 2024. It's very different next year. It's coming. It's exciting. Go. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes. Thank you, Allison. The company's growing. It's super exciting. We're going to do 5 to 6 retreats next year. First one in the UK. They are growing in size. We will service 45 or support 45 women at a time, broken down into smaller groups of 15 who were 12 and under when their moms died, 15 who were teenagers, 15 who were 21 plus. And we're also starting our first peer training program to start motherless daughters support circles all over the world, and increasing our motherless daughters community calls, our weekly virtual support calls, to include recent mother loss within the past 2 years.
I love it. I am so excited about it. I can't wait to keep watching how it's growing. And Charlene, people can work with you on their own personal projects. Very quickly, how can they do that? And I think it's a great opportunity. Could someone buy your services as a gift for the holidays for somebody else? Like, could they do that?
Absolutely. You can curate on your own, and sometimes we need a little help. So I do work one-to-one with people. Either they're curating for themselves or they're curating for someone else. And sometimes it's like, it's been 10 years. I want to reimagine what a memorial actually would look like that I want to give them now. So do go to charlenelam.com/holidays, and that has the best resource for you in terms of this topic of remembering our loved ones. And your attendees, you get a special discount for a workshop that I'm doing called Curating a Grief Gallery. So if you're feeling like, oh, you know what, I want to try this. I want to do something like this for the holidays. Yeah, go check out that link.
I didn't even know you were doing that. So that is so exciting. And Hope, I didn't give your accounts again, but it's Hope_Edelman on Twitter and Instagram, and Hope Edelman author on Facebook. Charlene, you just, of course, gave us your website again. So I'm so thankful. All 3 of these amazing speakers are, and I am too, are a part of the For Grief Speakers Bureau. If you are in a community group, or you are in a book club, if you're in a big corporation and they do lunch and learns, and you want to bring more of these types of topics to where you are and where this information is needed, please get in touch with us. That's why we built it. We want to help and be of service. And so with 1 minute left, I want to say thank you. We've all come from different parts of the earth today for this 1 hour, very meaningful conversation. And I thank you. I'm grateful for you. Tomorrow, you will get a thank you email. Everyone's links will be on there again. The full recording will be on there as well. If you had to step out, even for a moment, you can then do a replay. But I'm grateful for you, and happy holidays, and keep those memories close. And please do stay in touch, because I would really love that. Thank you for joining us.